All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Principled Tech Product. And what this is a podcast where we exclusively invite guests who have disrupted their industry by bringing a tech product to market. Generally, a tech product with either seven-figure potential or they've realized that already. Personally, why I want to do this is I strongly believe that to grow the Northeast and the UK economy, we just need more scaling businesses to disrupting their industries with tech and bringing tech to market. Because as Andrew will sort of mention, if it can be done, it will be done, and it's a question of if not when. And on that note, I'm really excited to introduce our first guest, Dr. Andrew Jenkins, CEO of Kinewell Energy. And why I'm excited about this conversation is what Kinewell have done. So Kinewell builds state-of-the-art tech products for developing cost-effective wind farms. One of Kinewell's products, Clock, saves 20% of capex on project lifetime costs for wind farms, which Andrew is presumably a number with a lot of zeros at the end of it in your world. So Andrew, welcome. What's your background, and what else don't we know that you'd like to sort of tell us today about you?
Thanks, Mark. Yeah, so I'm Andrew Jenkins, CEO and founder of Kinewell Energy. As you mentioned, we develop and commercialize innovative technologies that add significant scalable value to the world's biggest social and environmental challenges. That's kind of our strap line. So really, we don't want to be doing things unless it's scalable and has impact. And also, we want to do things that are new. There's no point in reinventing the wheel, particularly in the biggest challenge we have, which is climate change. We just don't have enough people to deliver it. So we need to be working together rather than competing with one another. So what all that means is, for us, we're developing software tools that optimizes the offshore wind farm. And in doing so, we're giving productivity gains to our users, but also meaning that we reduce the amount of raw materials that have to go into the wind farm so that the wind farm gets built cheaper and a lower carbon footprint. And of course, if it's cheaper, it means that for the same amount of capital that's being ploughed into offshore wind, we can build more wind farms and decarbonize faster. So from that, we have three software solutions. The first is called Quota, and that looks at optimizing where to place the offshore wind turbines themselves. Okay, so when you've got wind blowing through the turbines, you get a bit of a reduction in the wind speed behind it and a bit of a breakup of the air, and it means that any turbines behind that turbine don't generate as much. So we've got a really
Oh, wow.
strategic question of where to place the turbines based on
Yeah.
the probabilistic wind direction and wind speed. So that's one product. The
Mhm.
next product, which is what we're really known for, our bread and butter, is cable layout optimization. So that's how do you link those turbines up with cable, playing dot to dot. We're literally playing dot to dot to find the most economical cable route. And typically from that, we're saving in the region of 20% of cable system cost over the project life. And the
Yeah.
cable system is around 10% of the offshore wind project's cost. So we're adding value to the industry around 2%. And
Yeah.
finally, we've got another solution called KDOTS, and that looks at how to get the power back from the wind farm back to shore using the most appropriate technology choices.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I think one thing you could be sort of commended on there, Andrew, is your ability to sort of take a complex topic and dumb it down enough for sort of layman's like me. So thanks for that. You touched upon climate change. Does that link to sort of why you're doing this, Andrew?
Yeah, absolutely. It's the biggest challenge of our lives, and I do believe that as we get closer and closer to these kind of deadlines that we have, or seeing more and more impacts that we have, there will be more and more political pressure to accelerate the decarbonisation of our world, and
Yeah.
we're seeing that already with what's happening in the UK at the moment, with the change of government, with a massive step change in activities that are happening. So, for example, they've already announced the removal of the banning of onshore wind and GB energy that's coming forward, and increasing the ambition of offshore wind. But
Yeah.
even with the old government, we had to multiply the amount of offshore wind by 3 times over the next 6 years compared to what has been built in the last 30. Well,
Yeah.
with the new government, it's now 4 times, not 3 times. It's a huge challenge. Um, and a report last year said that we had 27,000 people in the industry. And to deliver on the ambition that we had with the previous government, we needed 100,000 people by
Wow.
2030. That's the 3
Yeah.
times increase in the
Yeah.
number of people that the industry has. And where are they going to come from ultimately? The universities are doing a fantastic job at training people to increase the skills pool.
Yeah.
But what we also need alongside that is the digital tools that mean that those people in the industry are doing their jobs faster, more effectively, and much better, giving them the productivity gains to do the job well.
Yeah, and I think, I guess your purpose and passion around that is sort of coming through as well, and presumably as well, you sort of see, um, start with why, for example, and sort of purpose-driven books like that, talking about how stemming a business from a sort of real passion and a real cause, makes it easier to sort of bring in people and clients and whatnot. So it seems like you've really sort of staked your claim as to like around that, which is really cool. You mentioned there about that sort of touched upon like the problems you sort of solve for customers there. So do you want to go into a bit more detail around that, Andrew?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're helping clients build wind farms,
Yeah.
and develop the design of them more effectively and reduce the cost. Now, everyone likes to reduce costs, so clearly there's a big saving there. Um, but also these projects don't get built unless they're cost effective.
Yeah.
Um, and we've seen that in the last round of auctions in the UK where there were no bids, and we hope that never happens again. And
Mhm.
that ultimately came about because of the inflationary cost pressures
Right.
that made it not economical to build the wind farm.
Yeah.
And what our tools do is they drive down that cost to make it economical to build the wind farm.
Yeah.
And not only that is the product. It compares both capital cost and operational costs, and the
Yeah.
amount at which you optimize one versus the other, it's kind of a trade-off,
Yeah.
is ultimately based on the cost of capital. So
Yeah.
when the cost of capital changes, as it has done over the last 2 years in a very big way,
Yes.
projects that were designed and optimized 2 or 3 years ago are no longer optimal for the current environment, and they need re-optimizing, taking
Yeah.
account of the new world for reprioritizing that future revenues versus current cost.
Yeah. And so again, I'm not an expert here, but you saw quite a big sort of spike in like the share price of renewable companies after, say, Joe Biden was elected back in 2020. And not long after that, we saw high inflation, and the price of money just increased. So where you might have a loan before, which is a couple of percent, you're now looking at lots of percent. So I'm assuming what you're doing is sort of relieving that pressure somewhat as well, just because money in general is just more expensive.
Absolutely, it's
Yeah.
part of it. I mean, the projects are finding it more difficult in the current environment because
Yeah.
a lot of it is built with debt.
Yeah.
Um, but we are helping to drive down the cost by having better designs. And
Yeah.
and as projects get delayed, they're having more time for the design process before that green light of
Yeah.
of actually building it. And during that phase, there's more time for more scenario analysis using
Yeah.
tools like ours, and through
Yeah.
more scenario analysis you get to lower cost wind farm designs.
Wow. Very cool. Very cool. And I think something my perception of your products as well, Andrew, and correct me if I'm wrong here, is they are disruptive. Like you've literally kind of made a market around this. So what sort of resistance have you seen sort of when selling a product in that environment?
Yeah, there's a few. So when we first started, which the first conference I went to trying to talk about this type of thing was back in probably 2015. Now
Yeah,
that sort of timescale, um, and I mean we started as kind of a bedroom business
yeah,
initially, and at that point in time, you're going up to these multinational companies. Um, that are multi-billion-dollar pound companies,
yeah,
and saying, I'm a little startup and I'm better than you in this one little tiny niche area. And of
yeah,
course, you then have the luck of, do you speak to someone that gets kind of defensive on that and says,
yeah,
actually, no, you're
yeah,
not, we're a big company, we're great? Or
yeah,
do you get lucky with the person that's open to innovation that then helps you link to the right people? So there's a lot of luck there.
yeah,
Um, but what you then get when you get through the door is you then get people that are, um, some don't believe that the savings are real, and they're
yeah,
asking that because we're literally saying we're playing dot to dot. How can playing dot to dot save you money, right?
yeah, yeah,
um, but then you also get this issue of some people initially, and this was before the big buzzword of AI and people knowing about productivity gains from software tools, saw it as replacing their jobs as opposed to giving them the tools to
yes,
do their
yeah,
jobs better. And there's a very big distinction between those, and
yeah,
particularly in a growing industry like ours where we need to multiply the industry by threefold in the next 6 years.
mhm,
No one's job is at risk. It's about
yeah,
helping people do more with the time they've got.
yeah. No, I think that's a really important point, Andrew, and it's something we see a lot as well in what we do. Um, so we're typically developing products for scaling businesses, to automate something internally and turn that into a product that they can then sell directly to their customers. So it's a bit of a self-serve, sort of what you've done with Clock, right? Um, and I think generally, I don't know how you find it, but generally, the person who might be running the project from their end is the person who might who feels that sometimes like their job is the one that's at risk if
Mhm.
by bringing this software in. And I think, like you said, it's a really important distinction because our observation is if you've got someone good in your business, if you automate that job, you want to find something else for them to do, which is just more valuable in the business rather than just doing whatever manual thing they were doing that replaces. Um, but I think that's hard to see when you're on the other side of the fence sometimes.
Absolutely, it is difficult, and the other thing that you have to be aware of is you almost have to wait your turn. So
Mm,
we see from initially it was a slow start for us, and part of the problem there was that these big developers that we were going and talking to, um,
yeah,
they had problems for building their wind farms that saved them more money than what we could save them. I mean, it's not uncommon that
right.
on a single
Yeah.
project we'll save them £50 million, right? Our
Mm,
savings are huge.
yeah.
But at the time when we very first started, they had problems even bigger than what we could solve.
Yeah.
Okay, and
Yeah.
so for them that had limited time, of course they were going to work with those other problems before they came to us, and we had to wait our turn. Now that's an
Yeah.
inevitability in these types of things, I think, because
Yeah.
if you um, are targeting the problem that is the problem trying to be solved right now, you're too
Mm,
late because someone
yeah.
else is already doing it. You have to
Yeah.
solve the problem that's going to come in the future in order for you to have a successful business.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's interesting because it's all relative, right? Like obviously £50 million to us, that's a lot of money, but if you're dealing with a multi-billion-pound project, it's probably a rounding error on the balance sheet, especially if you've got problems which are 200 million in sort of scale. So like how did you overcome that? Well, how did you recognize this in the first place? Like how would you if other people are sort of where you were then but now, and they're encountering this sort of resistance, like what would your advice to them be?
Well, there's a fine line in this stuff between,
Mm.
dare I say it, genius and insanity. In some of these things, and you have to have confidence, and you have to
Yeah.
have belief and conviction.
Mm.
Conviction in what you're doing is going to change the world.
Yeah.
Um, and and that is important. You have to have belief, and ultimately you have to have the numbers to back it up behind it, because
Yeah.
if you've done the numbers, it saves cash, it's worth doing,
Yeah.
and therefore you can run with that and keep telling people, and you will get there.
Yeah. And just around the point around meeting that resistance as well. Have you got any advice to people, on how to actually spot that is a barrier to a sale, if it's maybe not forthcoming?
Well, there's always lots of barriers to sales. So the best thing to do there is to speak to your potential clients and
Yeah. Yeah.
understand what their needs are. If you're not solving a problem that clients have, you're not going to sell anything. But
Mm.
equally, at the same time, there's a touch point there on thought leadership of, um, you need to also lead the industry as well.
Yeah.
So I'll give you another example. Within optimization, you have things called soft constraints and hard constraints of things that
Yeah.
you must stay within, or things that would be nice to stay within. And in
Yeah.
the cable layout problem, um, of playing dot to dot, in wind
Mm.
farms, you often have existing infrastructure on the seabed, whether it be unexploded bombs from the world wars, or shipwrecks, or existing oil and gas pipelines, and
Yeah.
cables that you need to avoid, because it's really expensive to go over them. Okay, or
I
remove
bet.
that
Yeah.
bomb, or
Yeah.
um, or cross that existing cable. And in traditional thinking, when we started in this world, there was a lot of people that would say you cannot go around, go through these areas at all. It's
Mm.
absolutely forbidden.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
and so it becomes a really hard constraint. You must not do it.
Yeah.
But then when you ask the question of, okay, how much would it cost to go through that space of the seabed? And
Yeah.
then you apply that as a soft constraint within the software to say,
I
if
see.
you go through this, it's going to cost you this much.
Yeah.
Then the software has the ability to move around and find other solutions. And what we find almost all the time when you do that is that the software finds more value in other places of the wind farm that was otherwise constrained by that hard constraint
Yeah.
than the
Yeah.
cost of going through that hard constraint.
Yeah.
Um, and by doing so, um, we're effectively allowing the software to be unconstrained
Mm.
by human prejudice, because
Yeah. Yeah.
that
Yeah.
thought process was human prejudice from very good reason,
Yeah.
but it was human prejudice. And when you remove that, you find value, and
Yeah.
we found a lot of value through that process.
That's so cool because it's almost like an industry perception is formed there because presumably because no one's really looked at it, or it's been really hard to look at it this way before, and you've brought this software to market which allows for that what if scenario. And because I always think it's quite dangerous when you hear, when you ask, oh, why do you do this like that, and then someone says, oh, that's the way we've always done it. Right, that's an immediate alarm bell
Yeah,
in my head, and it looks like you've just kicked that door through and said no. Actually, we're going to bring some software to market which just looks at that in a bit more depth and removes that prejudice, which is very cool.
absolutely,
um,
absolutely.
so cool. And I guess you've talked about a lot, talked a bit about sort of return on investment. How, and we've talked about how you've brought this product to market and disrupted. It's like how do you price something which just hasn't existed before?
Yeah, that's really difficult. And with all pricing, you've got different kind of pricing methodologies. You've got
Mm.
the pricing it based on what it costs you to deliver,
Yeah.
versus pricing things based on um, the value it adds to the client.
Yeah.
And they're two very different pricing methodologies, and they're both very, very valid.
Yeah.
Now, in most businesses, if you're trying to scale, you want to go more towards the latter, of course.
Mm. Mm.
Now, in our case, we're saving people £50 million in a project. We
Yeah.
can't charge anywhere near that,
Yeah.
ultimately, because the software would be redeveloped by others if we did. So you have to then start thinking about what are the other options for your
Mm.
client, and
Yeah.
and for us, for that can include simply a graduate with a pen and paper. okay,
Mm.
doing a manual optimization of playing dot to dot. That is
Yeah.
a form of competition. So when you start to look at all the different ways, and there might be 10, 20 different ways that people could do the same thing that you are doing,
Yeah.
but via non methods that are not designed for it, but it's
Sure.
ways in which you could do it. If you look
Yeah.
at all of them and then look at the difference in cost between
Mm.
doing in that method and the way that you would do it yourself, you then get a feel for the value add.
Yeah.
Now, of course, you cannot charge all of that value add. Otherwise, there's no point in your client using you, because you're then the same cost as the existing solution. So
Sure.
you do have to give some value to your client ultimately.
Yeah.
But by going through that process, you can come to a pretty reasonable cost.
Okay. So in summary, it's what looking at the return on investment around that, and then framing it against that, but also
Well,
looking at what the
putting
alternatives are.
yourself putting yourself in your client's shoes, thinking
Yeah.
about
So
it from your client's perspective,
yeah, yeah, I think it's very
and
important.
talking to your client, because
Yeah.
they, they might have something that you haven't seen, and that's
Yeah.
equally important to take account of. And if there is something, respond to it, and change your model appropriately for it. And it might not be price, it
Yeah.
might be the business model of at what point do payments become due. It might be the
Yeah.
timing of payments. It
Yeah.
there's various different things that can impact that, not just the physical price.
For sure. And I think I think those are the types of things that people tend to buy on. So if we look at return on investment, I think that's a very rational. You make that decision with your rational brain. Does it stack up? Are we going to get a return on investment? And it has to tick that box, right? In a world like this, otherwise it's just a barrier to sell. But you know, people, if I look at my world in terms of scale and business or public sector, they buy because they want. This is their position now, and this is the position they want to be, and they want to do that, with a, either very low risk, in a way which is proven, or um, they want to be seen as a market leading innovator. So it's those sorts of things, the emotional drivers that people buy on. So it's like, um, it's I think splitting the decision into those two camps as well can sort of help in the sales process, but maybe with pricing too, because like you say, people aren't always looking at that side of things. As what are the other things that you're doing which make their life easier in the process and make them just able to sleep at night ultimately when they're sort of buying from you. um, yeah. um, so if we just sort of change tact a little bit, what sort of personal attributes do you think contribute to your success, Andrew?
Well, to make the business work, I've got limited time.
Yeah.
Okay, I cannot do what I'm doing if it was just me. So
Sure.
you
Yeah.
have to recruit, and you have to bring people on to work with you.
Yeah.
Um, and it might take people you bring on more time to deliver something than it would take you yourself,
Yeah.
um, if you were to do it. But you've got
Yeah.
limited time, so you can't do it yourself. So the key thing there is that you can trust people to get on with
Yeah.
it on your behalf. So there's a lot of
Yeah.
trust there.
Yeah.
And related to that is the amount of support they need ultimately needs to be a hell of a lot less than if you were to do it yourself. Because if you're
Yeah.
spending more time supporting someone than it would take to do it yourself, that's when it becomes completely uneconomical to trust
Yeah.
someone to do it.
Yeah.
But that then means that when you bring on your team, if you really need to recruit for values over skills.
Yeah.
Certainly in our world, we are recruiting to do things that are new. And
Yeah.
by definition, if you're doing it new, people don't necessarily have the skills to do it. We're looking
Sure.
for transferable skills, but what's more important than that even is values.
Yeah.
And what you end up finding, or what I've found, is that um, if everyone is truly behind the organizational values and the direction of travel, you don't have to motivate anyone.
Mm.
is actually quite the opposite. You're kind of
Yeah.
having to pull people back to say, don't overwork. Everyone is so driven for let's solve climate change that
Yeah.
actually you have to stop people from working too hard. So
Yeah.
the main thing is recruiting for values over skills. Look for transferable skills, and that allows you to recruit from other industries, and that also then helps with the innovation um, and not having group think, and then trust in the team to let go, to allow them to do the job. And
Yeah.
that means
Yeah.
not micromanaging and empowering the team to express their thoughts and opinions and do what they need to do.
Yes, it sounds like you're talking about like an element of psychological safety there. So like a high trust team, which is creating then a high performance team in the background by the sounds of it.
Yes, yeah, exactly that, exactly that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think you touched upon a point there, which I think a lot of people who come into a degree of management or leadership sort of struggle with, and that is delegation. Because I think I think when you're dealing with people who are starting businesses or going through that journey, or even team members that you're coaching in leadership positions, it's not uncommon to hear, "Oh, yeah, I could do that myself, and I will do it myself, just because it's quicker than teaching someone else how to do it." But as you've identified, that's just not scalable, right? There's only one Andrew.
Exactly,
And
exactly, and
yeah,
you have to recognize it and go with it, and that is really
mm,
really difficult, is the letting go, because
yeah,
you're doing something that you know it needs to be done right, and you have to let people make their own mistakes, but do it in
yeah,
an environment where they feel empowered to make those mistakes, but in a way that it
yeah.
gets caught before it becomes a problem, to give them the support that they need.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've heard this framed a particular way before around type one and type two decisions. I think it is. So type one decision is, like it's reversible. If
Mhm.
someone makes a decision and it's incorrect, then that's cool, right? We can go back on it. Or type two decision, which is completely irreversible. You know, once you've made that decision, you're on that road whether you like it or not. And the theory is, well, most decisions are type one decisions, so most mistakes are reversible if that were to
Yes.
happen. So I think some of that, and understanding that just because someone does something differently, it doesn't mean it's wrong either, has really sort of helped me change my mindset around this. And seeing the results as well, I think there's something really cool about, because it's hard work, right? Getting a really strong team who deliver results, like getting that team in place and then watching them deliver results without you involved. There's something about that you don't feel until you're there.
And you learn an awful lot from other people.
Yeah,
If they do it
absolutely.
in a
Yeah,
different way,
yeah,
there's the question of why are they doing it in a different way? What's the
yeah,
logic
yeah,
behind it?
yeah,
And you can learn from that too.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, there's something really cool about that. And I guess on the flip side, Andrew, is there anything which you've learned, um, which has maybe held you back?
I'd say the same thing, actually.
Yeah, yeah,
It's very easy to go back into that world of I need to do this,
yeah,
because I've always
yeah,
done it, or whatever, or I don't quite have faith in letting go,
yeah,
and so it's a double-edged sword, absolutely. But
yeah,
it's what you
yeah,
have to do to scale the business.
yeah. And look, I think I feel like I'm probably in the same position as you there. It's almost like you've got this line, and you sort of oscillate that line between feeling like I've let go enough, or maybe a little bit too much, and then you somehow back into it, and you're a bit control freak mode again. Like I feel myself oscillating that line sometimes.
Yeah, and I think a thing that you once mentioned to me, actually, that was really interesting, is when you measure the success of a business, what are the KPIs that you are using, and is it
Mm,
just return on investment, or
yeah,
is it something like your time? How long can you be out of the business
yeah,
for without something needing your attention? And that's such an important KPI.
yeah. I mean, there's a school of thought around that. And to be fair, I've borrowed that in particular from a guy called Roscoe Lightly. He's a sort of scale up sort of consultant. And one of the things he impresses is that could you just take a month off? Like, could you take 2 months off, whatever it is. So I try and measure that now, and I think I'm at about 1 month. You know,
Hmm.
what would catastrophically fall over? You know, we're looking to fix those things just through delegation or whatever it is. You know, but I think with thought and with time, those things are fixable. You know, and I think it's quite freeing when you start to do those things as well, because actually you go on holiday and you're thinking, oh well, all the problems, all the things that would fall over about me not being here are like weeks or months out. You know, they're not things like now.
And when that is the case, you can take the step back and
Mm,
do more thought leadership, more strategy,
exactly.
and the really high level discussions that allow you to drive the business forward
Yeah,
much more
yeah,
effectively.
yeah, and those things, it's hard to sandwich that in between two day-to-day things which you have to do, isn't it? It's almost like you need the headspace to be able to do that, which is outside of like just doing like the day-to-day running of the business. I think they're two different mindsets, you know. Um,
It is, and you do
yeah,
straddle it both because the things that you have to do, it when it hits your email, it's you do it
yeah,
immediately because the business will fall over if you don't. There's
yeah,
there's those
mm,
things, but when
yeah,
you're not doing those things, as the CEO or the leader, you're doing the things that won't have any impact for at least a year.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
it's really long time scales, or it's super
yeah,
short and the business is about to fall over.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And that's where you need to be, right? It is that longer term sort of outlook, especially when you're sort of growing quickly. Um, with that in mind, how are you guys staying ahead?
Well, we are very much a SaaS business,
Mm,
software as a service, and that
yeah,
means that our clients effectively rent our software to have
yeah,
access to it themselves. Um, and that means that we're able as a team to have the capacity to step back and think about what the industry needs to allow us to be much more innovative
yeah,
and provide that thought leadership.
yeah,
So not so much the consultant where you're delivering a project directly for a
mhm,
client and it needs your time to deliver it.
yeah,
We're able to take that step back and think about what the industry needs. And I
yeah,
take that example again of the cable layout optimization and not crossing cable. Of
yeah,
what the industry was asking for was make your software so it doesn't cross this cable.
yeah,
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 and we have to give
yeah,
that because otherwise clients won't buy it if they're particularly in their mindset. But
mhm,
actually, through that being able to take a step back, we were able to say, no,
yeah,
we think we can find more value by doing this, and so we give the industry what we think they need as well as what they're asking for, and then
yeah,
it
yeah,
becomes an education piece to say if you do it the way we think you can do it, you can actually save money and prove it to them, and that
yeah,
in itself drives the industry forward
yeah,
and builds trust in what you're saying, and by doing that you become an authority in the little micro space that you sit in.
yeah. And I think it's been trotted out probably millions of times, but I guess what you're describing is something. Henry Ford said something similar, didn't he? Like if you asked at the time what people would want, they would have said faster horses. They wouldn't have dreamed up a combustible engine, which sort of wheels people around. So, and I think it is really important, Andrew. I think especially around innovation, there's a difference, which I think get mixed up sometimes between like what someone wants and what they need. Um,
Yep.
and it comes back to what you were saying before around sort of challenging the industry, challenging the mindset, and actually finding a better way to deliver what they need. Which is often contrary to what they want. Um,
But you often have to deliver what they want as well,
for sure. Yeah.
so that they have the choice and they see both what they want and what you think they actually want, so they can
Yeah.
compare both and then take the best value.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a very good point. Um, and hot topic right now, AI. How do you see that changing your industry and what you're doing?
Well, AI is very much around improving productivity
Yeah.
and improving speed. So naturally, there's a big thing there, and I come back to the point that we just don't have enough people in the
Mm.
industry. There's a
Yeah.
lot going on in our area related to robotics for offshore
Right.
wind, which
Right.
is great stuff.
Mhm.
You know, if you don't need to send people out to wind farms, it's a lot safer
Yeah.
because it's all offshore. The offshore environment is quite dangerous.
Yeah.
But actually, where we are particularly expert is in the world of optimization, which is a subset of artificial intelligence,
Sure.
um,
Yeah.
and that's where you are trying to make decisions based on information. So you typically need three things to do an optimization.
Mhm.
You need, what is the thing that you want to optimize? What are you willing to
Yeah.
change? And for us, it's the dot to dot, which turbine links to which turbine. Okay,
Yeah. Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
the thing that you're changing. You
Sure.
then need a, how does that changing lead into cost, or a single number that you want to increase or decrease? So in
Mhm.
us, that cable has a length, and that length
Yeah.
has a cost. So
Yeah.
as we change which turbine links to which, we're changing the cost, and through our system we're trying to reduce that cost. And then
Yeah.
you need a third thing, which is the constraints in which you need to maintain for
Yeah.
this thing you're designing to be implementable and real. And in our
Yeah.
case, when you've got turbines supplying a cable, um, you've only got a certain amount of power that cable can support
Yeah.
until it overheats and starts to melt and blow up, a bit like a household fuse. Okay,
Sounds expensive.
very expensive, absolutely. So you've got a maximum number of turbines that you can fit on the end of a string of cable, and that
Yeah.
for us is one of those constraints. And there's many
Yeah.
others.
Sure.
So you need those three things to create an optimization. And what we
Yeah.
see is that through those types of methods that we're using, if you applied it to something that has been done by rule of thumb
Mhm.
for many years, or is being done by hand, or um, the answer is, why are you doing it that way? Because we've always done it that way. Then
Yeah.
by applying these types of mathematical techniques that we use, then you would save in the region of 6 to 20%. Now,
Yeah.
naturally, it costs a fair amount to develop these tools,
Yeah.
and so that 20% has got to be big enough in cost terms to make it worth it. So you're looking at generally bigger problems,
Yeah.
but where they exist, the savings are huge, and where we're particularly fantastic in our optimization is the calculation time. Okay,
Yeah.
so we have very fast calculation times through the
Yeah.
unique IP that we've developed,
Yeah.
well beyond what most people see when they're doing optimization using advanced mathematics.
Yeah. And I think as well for the people listening, Andrew's sort of explaining this in layman's in a way which is sort of understandable. You talk about connecting this dot to dot here, right? And forgive me, right, because this isn't my area either. But you know, combinatorial optimization like this, I'm gonna guess if you counted all of the atoms in the universe and multiplied that by 100, there's probably in any given problem that you're solving more combinations in that than that other number. Like
Yeah.
the scale of the problem when you
Oh, the
when you put
scale
all
is
of these
huge.
factors in is huge. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'll give you one example. If you take Gwynty Moor offshore wind farm that's on the north coast of Wales,
Yeah.
for that wind farm, it's got 160 turbines. Okay,
Yeah.
and we've calculated the number of different combinations that that wind farm would have if you were to go through every
Yeah.
single one. Okay, and I've not got the slide in front of me, so I won't know the number exactly, but it's 10 to the power, I think, 249 different
Yeah.
combinations.
Yeah.
So it's 10 and 249 zeros on along the bottom,
Yeah.
number of combinations. And when you work that through as the um, to go and test every single one of those, which is the only way to prove you've got the best design, if
Yeah.
you've got a non-linear mixed integer non-convex problem, as this is because of the electrical losses,
Mm.
that's the power lost as you transfer energy through the cable.
Yeah.
um, it would take 10 to the power 222 times the age of the universe
Yeah. Yeah.
to go through every one of those combinations. So that's
Yeah.
the scale of this problem. You cannot go through every single one. It's a mathematically impossible problem. And the
Yeah.
point at which these combinational problems get considered kind of impossible
Mm.
is when you go above around 20 things that are having combinations around.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
that's the
And
point where
those,
it starts to go into years of calculation.
sure, so those numbers are, as humans, like our brains can't even comprehend those sorts of numbers. That's how big they are, So the problem is very, very hard, right? I guess is
Yes,
the layman's coming back,
the
bringing it back to
layman's
layman, very, very
we're
hard. Yeah.
solving one of the most difficult problems in the world.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I can totally believe that. Um, all right. And how how do you give back?
Well, we've just launched a new tool actually in the last couple of
Yeah.
weeks, which is an educational version of our software
Oh, wow.
called
Yeah.
EduClock.
Yeah.
And I've got to thank RS Group for this because they have helped fund it, which
Yeah.
is fantastic. And through their support, we're able to provide it free at the point of use for everyone in the industry.
Yeah.
And it's literally playing dot to dot, an educational
Mm.
tool to play dot to dot,
Yeah.
to teach school kids around the renewable sector,
Yeah.
net zero, and digitalization as well, to try and help
Yeah.
them with the math skills to equip them for these roles. And of
Yeah.
course, um, we're not alone in the industry of not having enough people. The offshore
Yeah.
wind industry hasn't got enough people. The digital tools sector, the sector you're in, Mark, doesn't
Mm.
have enough people. And
Yeah.
equally, there aren't enough maths teachers to teach people to bring them into these things. So the
Yeah.
the tool is there to help the schools and the teachers provide that education, if they haven't got all the people they need to be able to do it. But it also
Yeah.
brings in really fundamental concepts that people do at, say, GCSE, like Pythagorean
Mm.
theorem,
Yeah.
which is the length of the hypotenuse of a triangle. Well, that
Yeah.
is exactly how you calculate the length of a cable
Yeah.
from coordinates, Cartesian coordinates. So we
Yeah. Yeah.
can immediately put GCSE maths into context that often people can't put into context,
Mm.
and say, how does this get used in the real world? And then
Yeah.
from that, playing trial and error, which is again a GCSE concept, to design, playing dot to dot, design your wind farm to
Yeah.
reduce the cost of the wind farm and see firsthand how that Pythagorean theorem leads to massive millions of pounds cost reduction.
Yeah.
And of course, with a great educational tool, you've got a leaderboard for teachers to
Mm.
look at, so you can put a competition in there for the kids to win a prize and get a leaderboard. It's absolutely great. So and that is a
So cool.
free tool
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
all to use.
Well, Andrew, I can't wait to see. I can't wait to see the GCSE question around how do you layer a cable around a subsea bomb in the near future. That sounds very cool. um, all right, I guess we're coming to the end of this now. So, you know, for the people listening, Andrew, where should they look you up? Like, where should they find out about you and Kinewell and follow what you're doing?
Absolutely. Well, we've got our website where all our products and the EduClock tool can be accessed, and that's at kinewell.co.uk. And on there, you can sign up for our newsletter to see what we're up to. And of
Yeah,
course, we also have a profile on LinkedIn. I do personally too, and we're on Facebook and Twitter as well. So look on all of those sites and search for Kinewell.
cool. And we'll put the links to those things as well in the description for this video for anyone sort of watching this back as well in the future, the recorded version. Um, Amazing, Andrew. Like, I feel like I've learned so much, and it's just, I think it's an area which is just fascinating. So thank you sort of very much for your time. Um, to anyone listening, thank you for listening as well, and sort of taking the time out to sort of hear about Andrew, who's brought a disruptive tech product to market. What I would say is there are a lot of industries right now which are sort of ripe for disruption. It's never been easier to bring a tech product to market. It will become increasingly easier to leverage AI in places where they're not being leveraged now. And if if this has triggered any thoughts for anyone who is considering disrupting their sector with a tech product, or they're worried that a competitor might, we have a sort of 5 minute free assessment which creates sort of a really insight focused and action driven 20-page report. So we'll stick a link to that in the description as well. So it's at products.wilby.co.uk. If you like this episode, connect with Andrew, follow Kinewell, see what they're up to, and join our mailing list as well, because we've got more of this to come. Andrew, thanks again. I've just sort of loved having this conversation.
Thank you, Mark. Really awesome to be here.
Cheers. All right. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.